All right, we're ready to go. We're on.
Andy, would you like me to take George?
Sure.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Yuan den Queen Shi Go Jin Jin Je, Su Xin Den Ba Lung Ge Sa Wa Ru, Le Fa Chong Nen Be Wa Du Ma Yi, Wu Ba Chen Ba Den Ba Jin Ge Lo, Lin Ji Ni Me Dao E Den Sang Ti, Xin Tu Ni Ga Den Chen Shi Go Ne, Nin Zing Kun Zhu Ning Bo Len Be Lo, Gyun Che Me Ma Ge Wa Jin Ge Lo. 路上有我吹出不心，有路几百就我真不当，修为结束路当这么心，看那人这记心长我了，年把天不年年年被错，朝心朝我能阳风我当。 他那主把切巴拉，大都把当天把金给了，切为民安东安滚给高，一天米容西北滚走给，你没人哎，他别得我了，多年前不叫我金给了。 南大三八第一张八一，真大七心八有全部一。 天别早我说说长巴拉，主把宁波接把金给了，让你谁做龙啊记心都，满用肉啊滚江点着，从年着啊周围归根为，咱就先着长把金给了。 这家组织当中啦，恐怕没那讲究民主本儿，来把童年也是东巴啦，真把这个老把金给了，老辈有来言话细些听，杨大当啦走进这把一，新年啦当送都这位啦，牛都有啦叫我金给了。 Tumo lanjan du gyurbana teba kungi chokyo dojete. Kesa kyo tumo namba der dela nidu joba jingilo. Tete nguju nanye jubeshi nanda tansi tomba sumbala. Chama mimbe ngewa nigyone sotan dote sumwa jingilo. Tene kyute nimbo rinye ki nena jishin tone zambayi. Tunshi ne jo chogle miye war dambe sushin ruwa jingilo. Tetar lanzang dambe shenye dan sushin ruwe dona shatenshing. Shina nangi bargu chepe so, yewa shiwa jingge lang du so, kyawa kundu yanda lama tang, reme chuki pela lang chuching, sana langi yunten razo ne, dorje changi gopan yor to sho. Sangye chedan soge chona la chancho pardu dani kyasu chi dagi chuje give sunan ki chola pencha sangye druma sho sangye chedan soge chona la chancho pardu dani kyasu chi dagi chuje give sunan ki chola pencha sangye druma sho Sangye chedan choge chona la chanchu bandu tani kyotsu chi Dagi cheje gibe sonangi Drola penchur sangye drupan shok Saji peke choji me to tan Dira lingchi ninde gyambadi Sangye shingtu mikte uvargi Namda Shingmacha Idam Guru Ranamende Lakan Niryatayami. Okay. Do you have the text? Okay, maybe Andy can give you some.
Maybe we.
Great, thank you so much.
Does anybody have anything they want? I apologize for not leaving more time at the end of the class. I'm going to try to do that today, give you opportunity to quiz or raise questions or do anything you like. So does anybody have anything that is hanging on from past two classes that they want to address? Andy said something about one of the verses. He read that story about the relating to I think what is the third verse you said?
The third verse.
Yeah, the third verse about the travelers who rented a room and soiled it, and then were only willing to clean up their own poop, but not anybody else's. And so he thought that was kind of hard to connect that with the verse. Unless you're dying to go through that, I'll let it go. Chandrakuki's text is more, of course, he purposely raises those similes that are attributed to somebody else, and so he explains them. Geshe commentary sometimes only makes a passage sort of a reference to them. Sometimes it gives a little bit of explanation, but it's not always, absolutely clear. But anyway, I don't want to like go through all of those just because time is short. I will respond to anybody's questions, but some of them I'll pick out if as we're reading it. I think it'd be worthwhile.
I have a question.
Sure.
So this is very fundamental to this and other explanations, which is if I'm meditating on these topics and I'm having a hard time getting that emotional feeling, like if I'm meditating on death and it's still remaining an intellectual thing, and you were emphasizing in the first class,
right, exactly.
About like you really want to be viscerally emotional, and I don't know necessarily how can I cultivate that if I'm not achieving that emotional level.
Right. Okay. So we started out with that first point, which is that there's this secondary mental affliction, right, which is called in Tibetan Michu and Nambartawa. In Sanskrit is Amara Vitarka, which means this notion that one is not going to die anytime soon. It's not stated, but it's implied. And that's something that is habitual. So that's kind of the main focus. I was thinking about this, so I was ready for you.
Cool.
So in my mind, one way to go about this text in particular, and especially Lamrim text, is to personalize it. And by that, I mean every point is based on, I think it's fair to sort of approach it in a way where every topic that's being addressed represents or has built into it some kind of antithetical state of mind, right? That's the thing to be abandoned, right? In Tibetan, the word spanja. So, the ultimate things to abandon are the mental afflictions by eradicating them. In the case of a lot of the lamrim, especially the earlier parts of it, we can't really eradicate them, and that's not really what we're trying to do, directly. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of identify inappropriate attitudes that are kind of very shallow below the surface of our conscious mind and are kind of right there and are influencing us because of our sort of habituation to them. So I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to sort of bring that wrongful kind of state of mind to the surface, or at least in the sense that you can introspectively kind of what's the word, kind of make contact with it, psychologically, sort of, oh, here it is, identify it as, here it is inside me. This is kind of this mental state which, I can sort of kind of, put a spotlight on and try to, recognize it. That's really important, because then you take what each verse has, and the verse, so there is an antidote for that. And so the antidote is what you're wanting to call forth. And the antidote has the power to overwhelm, or to really drive that attitude, very much into a dormant state. And the idea is to replace that with a positive mental state that is overt and active, and then you try to meditate on it. That's kind of what I said before, right? So, but you have to. It's part of that process is to acknowledge that there's something negative that's meant to, correct, that the positive attitude is meant to correct. And you kind of need to be aware of that, or familiar with that as part of the exercise. And then hopefully then when you recognize it, or when you sort of call it up, then when you meditate, or when you understand, or when you kind of get the kind of the punch, what is the essence of the verse, what the verse is trying to teach you, then that becomes then you have to sort of actively identify the positive state of mind, and see. I think part of it is to understand how it has the ability to overcome and replace that negative attitude. So I think all of that is at work. Yeah, I would further say that in relation to the topic of impermanence, especially this rough impermanence, is that it doesn't stop there. The idea of meditating on rough impermanence is to evoke a sense of urgency, a sense of not squandering the opportunity that you have to pursue the Dharma. And then that implies doesn't you actually have to do that. You have to actually pursue the Dharma. And so it has to be something that leads to. And then typically the term that is used in the commentary is strive to cultivate mindfulness, that term, because that mindfulness is in relation to whatever your main practice is, or whatever it is that you're essentially focused on. But the two are linked, right? So this is sort of kind of a starting point that leads to the actual practice. It's a goad. It's something to kind of motivate you, but that alone is not a very. It in a sense it's in a lot taking a broader perspective. its direct, or its primary purpose is to turn away from this life, because it's unreliable. It's not of much purpose, spiritually speaking, and then to focus on what relates to beyond just this life. But the focusing part is something that you have to kind of follow up with. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we reached verse 6, I think. Yeah. Page 9 in the Tibetan. And so Shiva, line 5. Namjing ba mebe chua la minju ba chemi rikpa la ni. So this is the fourth section of the main topic of meditating on or cultivating, understanding the rough form of impermanence practice. So this fourth topic has two verses, and both of them come under the general heading is Namjing eba meba. Namjing eba means time of death is uncertain, and in fact, Chandrakirti uses that very term, that very phrase of uncertainty of death, time of death. Namjing eba mebe, then that shows reason. For that reason, Chiwala Minjikpa. Chiwala Minjikpa means not having apprehension about your death. Che mirikpa. Che mirikpa. Mirikpa means not proper, right? It's wrong. And then che is an adverb that is an intensifier. It is extremely inappropriate, very inappropriate, not to be concerned about your death. And it gives us a reason, because the time of death could come anytime. So that's the general heading for the next two verses. And then first one says, oh, this is nice. This is really, I like this verse. Let's see. So we're doing in the English translation, page 69. Okay, the death will come. Okay, and common beings. Yeah, it says. Okay, that's. So it says. First of all, she doesn't give the English translation doesn't give the headings. They're in the outline in the back of the book. So that the heading for this verse is That just says death is something that is common to everyone. It's universal. We know that, right? Everybody, that's what is it? Nothing is certain but death and taxes, right? So everybody knows that. That's tumoa, and xing means as a conjunction and. Not only do we have that understanding that death comes to everyone, we also observe death. Means we see it directly. Means we see it directly, and therefore recognizing that everybody's going to die, it means I'm not an exception. And then it's the fact that we observe other people's death should be, a reminder, and a very stark reminder that's going to happen to me. I'm going to be like that. And so, that should be enough to startle you. That should be enough to concern you, and especially this idea of namchi ngeme is a very among the points in the Lam instruction. This one in particular is said of the three main main points that relate to this. The first one is the certainty of death. The second one is the uncertainty of the time of death. And the third one is the recognition that when we actually, come to our death, only Dharma will be of any benefit to us going forward. So among those three, the second one is considered the one that requires the most effort. So it means that since we don't know when we're going to die, then it's appropriate to assume that we're going to die right now. It could be today. And not only could be, it's to make it conditional. As it says in some of the texts, it says, when you get up, you should assume that you're going to die today. And then with that sense of, the fact that this is your last day, what would you do to make the most of it, right? And the best example is what we all know about when people have a near-death experience, right? If they're in a car and they almost get in an accident, or maybe they get in an accident, but they escape unscathed, and then they say, "Wow, my life flashed before my eyes," and then very often people will say, who have those kinds of experiences, you have to live your life like it's your last. You have to live each day like it's your last day. But that's really exactly what this particular topic is meant to say to you and to encourage you to cultivate. There's one of the handouts from one of the sutras, translated from Pali. It mentions, it's called, which one is it? Go on. It's Mindfulness of Death 1. Okay, this is Anuttara Nikaya 619. And so so it starts out where the Buddha says mindfulness of death is a great fruit, right? It means if when developed and pursued is of great fruit. It means it is beneficial, right? And then he uses this word, it gains a footing in deathlessness. I think that's that same phrase that we read from that verse, Amartapada, right? It's the way to deathlessness, right? It's the way to nirvana. Gains a footing in the deathless, as deathless as its final end. So it means it culminates in nirvana. Therefore, you should develop mindfulness of death. It starts out that way, right? And then a certain monk says, "Oh, I developed that." He says, I cultivate mindfulness of death. So the Buddha asks him, "Well, how do you do it?" He says, "Oh, that I might live for a day and a night." Right? Day and a night means 24-hour period. So that I can practice the Dharma. Oh, sort of saying, may I have at least the next 24 hours to practice the Dharma, because I don't know if I'll have more than that. And so may I, pursue the Dharma within this current 24-hour period. And then another monk says, "Oh yes, I do too." And then each one sort of shortens the time. The one says, "Oh, I say, where is it? May I live for a day, right? May I be able to have just 12 hours to practice the Dharma?" Meaning the person is thinking it could come even within a shorter period of time. It goes down, and it ends with the person saying, the final person says, "I think, oh, that I might live for the interval that it takes to breathe out after breathing in." So that's saying, in any instant. Right? So to be, death could come literally right now. And so may I have at least one more breath to practice the Dharma. And so then the Buddha says, he expresses approval of that final point, saying, well, that final person is mindful of death in a very, very strong way. And the first person who said, "May I live 24 hours, is also mindful of death, but not as intensely, right? So that captures really the sense of, feeling that death could come at any moment, that it's impending. And of course, if you if you only think about that, that's almost you know, a kind of you can't do that, because if you only think about that, you're not going to do anything else. But the thing is that if you think about it, you know, with some regularity, then it will serve to spur you to then actually practice something immediately. So the antithesis of don't put off, don't put off. You know, try to make as much time right now as you can. So in the Lamrim Chömo, it says there's 3 root categories, the ones I mentioned. Each one of those root categories has 3 divisions to it, 3 separate points that you can meditate on. And then each one of them has its own determination that you're supposed to reach at the end of that section. So the one that relates to the uncertainty of the time of the death is, I should practice Dharma right now, right? Not wait, not say, well, you know, maybe tomorrow. So that's really the quality of, you know, urgency that you're meant to develop. Okay, so that's good enough to start with. Okay, so he says. Now the first one was, if you recognize that death comes to everyone, and you actually see around you, oh, so-and-so died. Oh, you hear so-and-so died. Somebody that's a family member or a neighbor or somebody that you know. Oh, that person died. You know, again, that's meant to be, you know, a reminder. Okay, so it says, if that's the case, then that should be enough to trigger the sense of apprehension about death, which is the exact opposite of that secondary mental affliction. Okay, so so that apprehension is you know, a phrase that refers to this sense of I could die literally at any time, and so no time to waste. Okay, so now the actual verse, okay, verse 6. And this verse is very interesting linguistically, because I think, and I mean, I don't want to, you know, I'm making reference to both of these translations, and I guess want to say again and again, I'm not beating up on either of these. If I question, or if I, you know, sort of give a different interpretation from what you see, it's not meant in any way as an attack on those. But I think, in fact, both of the translations almost are identical in relation to this verse. And I think both of them are really kind of, are not sharply capturing in language what the verse is, the kind of how to sort of translate the verse as a whole in such a way that the message is clear. Okay, so here it says, this is now the kind of lead into it. It says, Sosokyo is this technical term for a non-Arya. Pratyekjana means ordinary person in Tibetan, Sosokyo. And what that term technically means, they have not achieved the status of an Arya. What that implies is they have not yet perceived selflessness directly. Since they haven't perceived selflessness directly, they may or may not still be subject to the mistaken belief in a real self. So they're, in fact, in Tibetan, they'll say, you can be Sosokyo, right? You can be a so-called non-Arya, but be someone who's already developed true renunciation. You can be someone who is a non-Arya who has developed shamatha. You can be someone who is practicing even vipassana, but still not an Arya. So that person could be, you know, very, you know, astute Dharma practitioner and still technically be a non-Arya. But in general, it's not referring to, you know, that kind of non-Arya. It's referring at the bottom end of the, you know, range. And so Tibetans will differentiate that, and they'll say Sosokyo Tamelpa. Then Tamelpa means ordinary. It means like an ordinary non-Arya. It means a non-Arya who is very much still subject to mistaken ideas. Okay, so here it says Sosokyo Namki Doctor me bechiwe yermer. It says those persons are subject to an inescapable death. Doctor means a death which they cannot, avert, right? So as we mentioned before, when we talked about the four maras, there are those practitioners who have transcended death, right? The arahats are those who have, overcome the Lord of Death. Buddhas also have overcome the Lord of Death. Okay, but rank non-Aryas, they're very much in the grasp of the Lord of Death. Here it means to be subject to them, to that, right? Here means even though they are Tanda Ngeba Masimbe. Is it that Detar? Maybe it should be Detar. They don't realize they have not ascertained that fact. They have not ascertained the fact that they are subject to death. That means they're not aware, they don't have a sense of awareness about their mortality and what that implies for them. Masimbe Mijik means therefore they are not afraid, or they don't have any concern. They are not apprehensive about their death. It's an ordinary person walking down the street. They're not thinking about their death today. Right? Because they have not, ngeba masin, means they have not ascertained, or they have not properly comprehended their mortality and what that implies. So Shena says, so if you say that's the way ordinary people are, then the verse then is meant to be, this leading is meant to sort of describe someone who's saying that it's understandable that they don't have that concern, right? So then the verse is saying, it may be a fact, but it's completely inappropriate, right? So the verse is indicating the inappropriateness of that ordinary person's state of mind regarding death. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting. So here he says, the simile, the first line is a simile. Like cattle that are to be slaughtered, that are about to be slaughtered. Okay, now here, how do they translate? One says, this is from the Getsamchi commentary, it says, like cattle intended for slaughter. Oh, they got that part right. Okay. Then the middle two lines, it's how they connect those middle two lines that I have an issue with. So it says here in this version, it gives you a sentence which ends with a period. It says, like cattle intended for slaughter, death is common to all, period. As if that's the main point, right? That it's saying common to all. They're not saying like the simile is meant to indicate that all beings are mortal, right? But I think, and then it goes on, and then the second half of the verse makes another point, but it doesn't link it all together. Then it says, the second sentence is, moreover, when you see others die, why do you not fear the Lord of Death? So it's like two assertions. Everyone is subject to death, similar to the way that a herd of cattle that are at the slaughterhouse are all about to be slaughtered. Point one. Point two, you see people dying around you, so why not be concerned about your death? I mean, I guess you can connect the two, but I think that by making them two separate sentences, it doesn't have the clarity that the verse calls for. So I think the idea is as follows. Okay, so the middle two lines are right? Right? Means death is common to all. right? To everyone, right? Sheyan chiwa nangyurna means and moreover, right? Moreover, so for instance, what is this? How does this one go? Let's see. Oh yeah, he says when you see others die, that's the shen. Shenyang chiwa nangyurna, right? Shenyang chiwa nangyurna. Is suggesting that persons other than yourself. My reading is actually different. The Shenyang is not other persons, but rather it's in addition to the fact that death is common to all. Shenyang means not only is that the case, also you're seeing people die. You're seeing instances of people dying. And those two together should, so it says, given that those two things are evident or are known to you, then it says, so why are you not apprehensive about death? Okay. Now, here's how I kind of want to sort of work with the wording to kind of bring the idea out more clearly. So the idea of like cattle who are about to be slaughtered, that simile, is saying, why are you like cattle who are about to be slaughtered? It's not just in the abstract. If you take cattle that are about to be slaughtered, they're all going to be, death is coming to all of them, right? That's the way it's written as a separate sentence. But I think the simile actually connects with the last line. It's meant to connect with you, and it's criticizing you, the reader, you yourself who are a practitioner. Why do I behave like cattle who are about to be slaughtered, in the sense that they are all about to be slaughtered? Not only are they about to be slaughtered, they can even see individuals being led off, and sometimes it might even be done right in front of their eyes, and they just sit there dumbstruck and don't do anything. So it's saying, why are you like that? That's the point. Why are you like cattle that are about to be slaughtered? Why are you dumb? Why they don't seem to be concerned about the fact that they're about to die. Why should you be like that? And you shouldn't be like that. So I think the middle two lines are a bridge. The middle two lines describe cattle who are about to be killed, right? And the fact is that they are all going to die, and they're even seeing their fellow, beings die in front of their eyes, but it's not moving them. And then those same qualities are, you too should understand, that all living beings, not just cattle that are in front of the slaughterhouse, but in fact, universally, all living beings are subject to death. And you, not a cow, but you personally, you are seeing people around you dying. So those two characteristics apply to cattle that are about to be slaughtered, and they apply to you in the larger sense, right? And then the final line is saying, why do you behave like those cattle? In the sense that you are not moved, in the sense that you don't seem to be worried or concerned. That's kind of if you read it, so here it says, like cattle about to be slaughtered, death is common to all. When you see others die, why do you not fear the Lord of death? So it's almost like they're two separate things, and they're treated separately. I don't know if I'm making a big deal about it or not. To me, if you try to translate it, I think you want to say, you want to sort of allow those two characteristics to modify both the cattle in the simile and you. So I came up with something like this. Why? I'm saying cattle who are about. So it's like this. It should be like this. Like cattle who are about to be slaughtered. Leave out the middle lines. Why do you not fear death? Well, so cattle who are about to be slaughtered don't fear death. And what is true about cattle, right? What is true about cattle for whom death is universal, death is common. I mean, all of the ones that are at the slaughterhouse, they are going to die, right? And they are also seeing, those cattle are also, so it's for whom death is common and who are also seeing some of them die in front of them. Then why are you like that and not fearing death? Okay, I kind of didn't tie it together, in a sort of concise way. But I think in a literary sense, there's a little bit of a difference in the way when you just read those two translations and that. Okay, I hope I'm not.
It's also more helpful because if you do that as a meditation, then if you're picturing yourself as a cattle and then you're seeing like
well, that's absolutely clear. Is the simile is don't be like those cattle. Right.
But to inspire that fear.
Yeah.
Kind of like,
yeah, true. That true. They're about to be slaughtered, and you could die anytime. Right. Okay. So the lead-in is to say, that people don't fear death because they haven't sort of reflected on the fact that death is universal and that they see people dying around them. And because they haven't reflected, they don't really pay much attention to their mortality. Okay, so now here are the commentary. This commentary sort of follows Chandrakirti, I think. So here you're just saying, our mortality, our death is not so difficult to comprehend. It's not difficult. Everybody knows we're going to die. Then it says, and then it says the cattle who are about to be killed. So here, you see he extends the simile. He puts the like after those two characteristics that come in the second and third line. Like cattle who are about to be slaughtered, for whom death is universal, and who also see, some of their fellow cattle right in front of them being killed. So like that, death. Now you take this. Now you take what the point of the verse is, sort of what the simile refers to. Chiwa yang means that now death too means death, our own death. Rangja so kyo kwingi tumo inchi. Our death also, for it leaves out. He adds the so kyo means there are certain exceptions. The exceptions are arhats and Buddhas. But those of us who are non-Aryas, ordinary non-Aryas, then death, here in death due to the power of karma and mental afflictions, meaning death which is out of our control, is common to all such non-Aryas. And Shenyang, then here in the Tibetan, it's also this moreover rather than seeing others die. Shenyang means furthermore. Dumashik means many examples of other beings on, we drive down the highways, see dead deer, Shi Simba Tongxing, we see animals and beings who have already died, right? You pass a cemetery, those are not just pretty rocks there, those are markers of people who have died. Dumashik Shi Simba Tongxing, we see people have already died. Dadayang means, and even now in the present moment, Dumashik Chi Shimba means there are people who are in the throes of dying. We know people who are mortally ill and who are, we feel, grief and sorrow about loved ones who are, facing their impending death, in a very real sense. Therefore, Chi Shimba Dang Chiwara Nawa Nawa means to be evident, to be clear, to be observable in this case. We observe death around us. Juna, then that's a conditional. It means given that, or when that is the case, chiwa maton jutsen du che ne. So then we can't say, I'm not aware of death. I don't see death, right? Chiwa maton jutsen du che means we can't give that as a reason for not being concerned about death. So we're not aware of death. We are aware of death. These two examples are, very plain and very evident. Chola chidagi jikpa du chi me. So why do you not? What reason do you have for not fearing death? It shouldn't be that, right? It shouldn't be the fact that you haven't that you're not aware of death. Right? And then, so that's a rhetorical question, which implies you should reflect on apprehension about death. You should be apprehensive. Yeah.
Sorry. At funerals in the Tibetan tradition or any other tradition, do they say any prayers such that bring this to mind, or do they just expect that you will think about it yourself? Do you know?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a anthropologist, so I'm not speaking with any kind of authority about Tibetan culture by any means. My experience, in being in living in proximity of temples where they do have funerals, typically that's not the main. It's not like they don't use that as an example for the people who come to the funeral to reflect on their own mortality. Typically, what the purpose of the funeral is to do a service which will be of benefit spiritually to the departed, to generate virtue, which is then dedicated to that person to help ensure that their future life is favorable. That seems to me what the kind of the mindset is at most funerals.
And also to remember what they give into the world.
That's a Western thing.
That's Western?
Well, if it's somebody that has had a remarkable life, maybe some words would be said about that. But typically, the funeral services themselves, they're called what are they called? Jangchok. I don't know. I don't really get off on Tibetan funerals, but Jangwa means to purify. Chok means a ritual for purification, and it means there is a famous tantra which is called the Durgati Parishodhana, means the purification of the lower realms, which is meant to avert having to be born in the lower realms. Okay. Okay. So Chue Jipa Samba Chao. Yeah.
Is there anything in the grammar of the verse that lends itself to your reading? I'm just curious. Like the shing at the end of the second line and the na at the end of the third.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I would say that I look at the verse and I try to. Well, this is kind of another thing that I can say. I don't know that it will help or not. But when I think that there is a when you read a Dharma book, it doesn't matter prose or verse or not, that if it doesn't, if you don't get this sort of, if it doesn't have an impact, then you're not reading it right. So I'm looking for that impact in the verse.
So it's variable. I mean, you can choose any.
Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
But you could have gone two ways with this, let's say. Or one could have gone two ways with this.
You mean that you could read it either of two ways?
Yeah, the way that the other translators read it. I mean, when I'm looking at this, a little that I know of Tibetan, it seems like your reading is accurate to me. I mean, because it's all, these are all sort of continuative particles. But, you know.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not going to, you know, twist your arm or anything.
No, I mean,
I can repeat what I said, but
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like,
I mean,
Because
I think
it's
the way you do it
poetry.
is you think about it.
yeah.
You think about it.
Right.
So what is the simile? How's the simile supposed to work, right? So it's like cattle that are about to be slaughtered. That's pretty clear. That's pretty much an image of, you know, their death is imminent, and yet they're dumb animals.
Yeah.
So they don't do anything about it. They just stand there and wait for it to happen, right? And so the last line is, so why are you like that, right? That's kind of the, you know, the main point of the sentence. And then the middle two lines give you reason why you shouldn't be like that, right? Right? And the middle two lines apply equally to the simile, but they more importantly apply to you, as if you use that understanding, it should flip you and make you not be like those cattle. So that's kind of, I mean, could I say that's the kind of, to me, the logic of the verse.
And then in the commentary, he says,
He tied it together at the beginning, right?
yeah, Yangshin Chiki Chiki Chiwa. So yeah, you see it one by one.
No, chiki chiwa yang tong. Chiki means one sees the other. So sometimes one and one is you say one and other. One sees another dying. And so if they're standing in line, you know, it's like, you know, oh look, you know, Charlie, the sheep up there, look what happened to him. You could be talking to the, you know, sheep next to you, right? Look, he just got his throat slit. Oh, yeah, okay. And just, you know. So chiki chik tong means that one sees another. Right. So we are like that. We are not dead yet, but we see others around us dying, and yet we shouldn't be like cattle and not be unfazed by it. It should, you know, alarm bells should go off. Okay. So, did I convince you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What would the cattle do if they realized that Charlie was dying?
I don't know. I mean, they might, you know, would they start bellowing and try to stampede and try to leave? They don't seem to do that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are just.
Well, there are stories like in New York City or other places where there's some animal that's escaped from the slaughterhouse, right? And then they take those to a what do they call those places? Like a refuge, an animal refuge, and they save it from.
Save it. Oh, okay. That's very Buddhist, right?
I also remember when they're being brought to slaughter, they're in these lines that are, and they're really pressed in close, and they have no clue too. And they can't escape.
Well, but now you're like you're straying from the simile.
But that's a modern thing, right?
From a Matsawa's point of view, you seem more rigorous. I mean, it just seems logical what you're saying. It just seems like you're bringing. You just.
No, I mean, I try to look at the Tibetan. I know that I tell you what I actually do is I look at the Tibetan, and in my own sort of you know, imperfect way, I try to reconstruct Sanskrit. Sanskrit is very is much. First of all, it's a much more inflected language than Tibetan, and so it's easier to kind of to see the connection, syntactically how the words kind of tie together. So I can say I try to, you know, look at. I mean, I don't pretend to be able to reconstruct the Sanskrit, but it gives me a sort of. That a part of the exercise helps me to kind of, you know, take the verse as a whole and see what kind of internal, you know, connections there are.
So there's no existing Sanskrit of Chandra.
There are some. There's a partial manuscript and some verses, but not all of them. Most of them, so far in the first chapter, we haven't. As far as I know, hit any yet. You come at the very end of the chapter, yeah.
Just an aside that Temple Grandin, who's an autistic adult, has built slaughterhouses for animals and thought very empathetically about their experience. She's written a book about it. I don't have the name.
I'm sorry, who?
Brandon is her last
Great
name.
book.
Oh, okay.
Brandon, Grandin.
Oh, okay.
She's thought very deeply about their experience.
Oh,
Dying and
yeah.
how we slaughter them.
Okay. So then it says, now here this is the next line is the sort of story that is an example that this other person gave in some earlier commentary. So and it's really, the story is not terribly different from the actual verse, but some of the language is the language sort of reinforces what's already pretty clear, I think. So it says Sebe chuk nam shenbe chuk jik seba tong shin du shen da. Then this is an odd translation. So this is in the Sanskrit translation of Chandrakirti's Tibetan translation of Chandrakirti's Sanskrit. So sobarneva, which is kind of an odd and not a familiar phrase. And somewhere along the line, to me, dewarneva. Dewarneva means to be at ease. So they're at ease, even though they are, a group of cattle that are going to be killed are seeing another individual cattle being slaughtered, and yet they remain sort of calm. Neva shindu mijawar. Mijawar means don't do that. Don't be like that, right?
Can you spell that?
Huh?
Can you spell that, Migawa?
Mijawa. Jawa means to do. Mijawa means not negative. Don't be like that. Do not do that.
Migawa.
Me is one of the negative particles. Ja is the verb to do. Mija means don't do it. Mija, not ga.
Ja.
Mijawar, gewala ba yobar never chao. Says rather than that, gewala ba yobar never chao. So here's the point that I was making before, is that rather than being sort of oblivious, gewala means virtuous activities. Ba yobar means cultivate mindfulness. So never chao means be, or it says remain in a state of mindfulness about virtue. So as I mentioned to you, the mindfulness has two kind of aspects to it. Miguel Alessem Soma, right? Miguel Alessem Soma means guarding your mind from non-virtuous activities. So that's like reining in bad impulses. And then Gewala Druberchao. And then if you're not having to do that, if you're in a state of somewhat self-control, then you should use that to cultivate positive virtues. Both of those are sort of like two wings of the overall exercise of practicing heedfulness, or what I call mindfulness. Okay. Okay, so that is that verse. This is within the category of the uncertainty of the time of death, and then it's not that difficult to understand your mortality. So pay attention. The second verse is Namchi Ngebachen du Matongwe Jig Migrabaka. Then this is kind of a different take on the same theme, which is Namchi Ngebachen. Namchi Ngebachen means the fact that the time of death has certainty, right? Namchi Ngebachen du Matongwa means not recognizing, not seeing it literally, but means not recognizing it. That should not be a reason for you to not be concerned about death, right? The previous one was it's so easy to comprehend this that's really inappropriate not to cultivate. Then now this one is saying you can't claim that you don't recognize it. So here it is kind of similar, but kind of takes a different approach. So the other one is saying, the first one is saying is kind of what is it? You say admonition, right? Don't be stupid, right? Don't be a dumb cow, right? This one is saying something slightly different. So this is saying, get the chiwangosun to mikan. Now here, this saying chiwangosun to mik means we do perceive death directly. We do see death around us, right? It is evident, but the fact that it's not, the time of its coming is not certain. Therefore, then he says, Chiwa dokba la shindu gube chicha. So chicha means why. Why should I be? And it says shindu guba means here it doesn't mean respectful, right? Guba normally means respect, but shindu guba means very attentive, right? Very attentive about averting the unwanted consequences of death, right? Chiwa dokba, or in the extreme form, it's being able to overcome death. You can even say overcome death is the ultimate goal, right? To achieve immortality in the sense of enlightenment. Chiwa dokpa la. If you take it in its literal sense, Chiwa dokpa would mean either to become an arahat or to become a Buddha, right? Remember we read that passage about the 4 marks. Shinto guba means to be very, it doesn't mean only attempt, but it indicates a sense of effort. Sometimes there are 2 adverbs that are used in relation to tsundru, right? There's a taktu druva. Taktu druva means continuous, and then gurubar druva means then to regard it with great importance and therefore cultivate it. Right? Shintu gube chicha means if you think that I don't know when I'm going to die, so why should I kind of drive myself crazy thinking about it, right? You always say, I don't know when I'm going to die, so let me make the most of my life while I still can, right? That attitude is saying. He said, "Nyamna" means if you have that kind of thought, mirikte means that is inappropriate. All right, so that's presumably what this verse is saying, and then it also gives the kind of the instruction for how to avert it or how to overcome it. So this is kind of what as I've been going through this, I want to kind of stress that each verse should be taken as having these 2 elements in it, especially in this chapter, these couple of chapters. They express the wrong attitude that we should, recognize in ourselves, and identify it for us, and that we should sort of take note of that, and by introspectively discovering it within our own minds, our tendency to be that way. And then when we sort of are able to do that, to sort of, put a little, put it in a little area where you separate it from all the other things that are going on inside your mind, you can isolate it. That's a really big part of Dharma reflection, is to sort of, strip away all the extraneous stuff, all the discursive thinking that is, irrelevant, especially when you're meditating, right? You don't want to be distracted, and then sort of try to honing in on some very specific kind of quality in your mind, and sort of finding it sort of in its purest form, like that. So you should do that, and then you should get the remedy for it, and then sort of fire up that remedy, and then drive away, or sort of overcome that, or kind of reinforce the idea of the inappropriateness of that wrong attitude. That's Dharma practice. That's a kind of that's an exercise. That's a mental exercise that you can do, and you can get good at it. And I maintain that the method that you have to do is that you have to sort of be able to kind of isolate different elements within your mind and find kind of the core point that you're looking for, and then figure out how to work with it. Okay, so this is a pretty easy verse, very straightforward in terms of language. Because there's no certainty regarding time. It's interesting, the word time in Sanskrit actually means death. They use the word kala can mean death. Like kala kur means to make the time is means to die, to undergo the the big T.
Excuse me. So Kala Chakra. I've always realized.
Yeah, that's different. That's not talking about death. But if you I'm not telling you to go out and buy a Sanskrit dictionary, but if you happen to, there's the standard Sanskrit dictionary is Moni and Williams Sanskrit English Dictionary. You look up kala as the word for time, you'll see several references where the word is understood to mean death. So here it says Chiwedu means the time of death, but in Sanskrit I think the word time itself means death. The time is uncertain, right? The big D time is uncertain. For that reason, means so if its uncertainty leads you to think you're not going to die, right? That your daktago means that you're permanent, literally, right? That you will go on, your life will go on indefinitely, if not forever, at least for some indefinite length of time, and you're sort of focused on that. That's the very essence of that amara vitarka, right? That thought where you are sort of gravitating towards the fact that you're not going to die anytime soon, right? And here it's saying because you don't know when it's going to happen, right? So that's a logic which says because I don't know when it's going to happen, then let me assume it's not going to happen, right? And so what the author is saying, that's the opposite of what you should do. Given the fact that you don't know when it's going to happen, you should assume it's going to happen right now or anytime very soon, right? So it says, Namshik du na, and the second half of the verse is just says that. At some time, death, chidak means literally the Lord of death, but in Sanskrit, the word can just be death itself, right? At some time, it means a certain time, death is going to literally harm you. Death is going to destroy you, you can say even. So, and I think the kind of the contrast between the first half of the verse and the second half of the verse is you're putting out of your mind the notion of your mortality, and when you do that, you're actually making the event of your death that much more traumatic when it does come, right? That much more, frightening, that much more terrifying, that much more, tragic even, right? It's as simple as that. It's a very simple idea, but you know, he's saying, you know, again, that's the opposite of what you should do. Then here comes out of trying to get you. It is a very stupid. Right? That's a really dumb thinking, right? So the fact that the time of death is uncertain is a reason for you to prepare for that death starting right now. Dering can mean today or can mean from this very moment. You should be preparing yourself. Means to be, it can be kind of on guard even. Is like what do they call them?
Sentries.
Yeah, what sentries do. Means to be on the lookout for it, right? You should be, you know, having it in mind. And here, this is a typo. Sadase should not, it should be sang-a-sang. It just means tomorrow, right? Even if you don't die today, sang la sokpa, then it may be tomorrow or some other day, but without question, on some occasion, Chidagi, the Lord of Death, is going to, you know, destroy you. And that's just restating the verse in prose. So, I mean, I think it's not a very complicated idea, but it's saying don't do what is described in the first half of the verse, because he says, this is kind of nice language. This is a little bit different. This is, he says, because that time is going to come when you are taken, therefore, while you're still alive during this uncertain time, when death has not yet visited you, rewadorne. Rewadorne means you should abandon that, literally it says hope, but it means that that false sense that you're going to live for a extended period of time, right? That wishful thinking, even, right? Rewa here means that wishful thinking that you will you'll not die anytime soon. Give that up. Rewa dorne, chiwa samne. Reflect on death. Reflect on the imminence of death. And having done so, Taralam Druba. Now, before it said Gewal Labagyo and Never Chao was the last phrase in the previous verse, right? Now, here's the kind of just switches up the wording and says Taralam Druba la Bagyo Chao. So it says, be heedful or be mindful about pursuing or cultivating the path to liberation. Make that your goal. You know, don't be distracted by the meaningless worldly activities of this life. Then let's see. I think is there a phrase in here? He says. Oh yeah, he says. This is in Chandakirti. He says, there will come a time, he says, you who are mortal. Definitely there will come a time when the Lord of Death, you know, strikes you, you know, destroys you, and by ending your life, Yurte. And then he says here, this is Chandakirti, where he kind of uses a phrase which I think sort of kind of captures how you will react the heedless person, how they will react when death comes to you, right? Is the fact that you sort of put death out of your mind, but then when the time comes and you're faced with your death, then it becomes this horrific thing. So he says, Gurte means when death definitely is going to come at a certain time and destroy you. Dene means at that time, Nyamki Shebarjuro. Then it says, experientially, you will understand your mortality. You will experience your mortality directly. So the person who doesn't react to the mortality until they're actually experiencing it is not an enlightened person. That's my kind of spin on it. So that's kind of the message of the verse. And then here is, I'll just tell you this reference here. It's, one of the stories is, Perna Simbo Bake. Simbo Baka is a story taken from the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is the Indian, what do you call it? Yeah, right, the epic story. And one of the incidents in it involves, the main figures are in a certain area. They come to a certain area, and in that area, there is this Rakshasa. Rakshasa is a shasa, means a flesh-eating demon or ogre. And that's the name is referenced, symbol here, symbol, right, is a Rakshasa. And his name is Baka. I looked it up online, and it says Bhagasura. Bhagasura is a more expanded form of the name. And this Rakshasa was such that he had terrorized this area, and the king had agreed to give him some tribute, food, once a week or something like that. And some poor, subject of that kingdom had to deliver that food. So the nature of it was that the Rakshasa would take the food and then also eat the person who delivered it. So it's kind of like, don't be the person who doesn't realize that the Rakshasa is going to eat you at some day, right? So it says, Perna Simbo Bage Sare La. Sare means every time his food is given to him, Yulde Mi means the inhabitants of that country. Mikun means all of them. Rimgi, one by one, would have to go and deliver the food, and they would and all of them were being killed that way. So okay, anyway, these are kind of, I mean, my take on it is that these are kind of whoever this person Dharmadasa was, who wrote I believe must have written a commentary to Aryadeva's root verse, is that he wrote a commentary, and then he just sort of, as this kind of a literary exercise, he would sort of append these allusions to stories that are widely known and that are meant to be illustrative of what the verse is saying. And then I mean, we don't have the commentary, so we don't know whether he just gave the allusion and that's all, or whether he's spelled out or kind of elaborate on stories. But Chandakirti, presents the allusions, Perna or Shino means like, or for example, and then Chandakirti sort of explains them a little bit. But I think they're not essential. I mean, they're kind of it's kind of the, I think it's kind of the almost the notion of, not Subhashita. Subhashita is a literary kind of convention of poetry that is meant to be didactic but very sort of pleasing in its style. So these are, I think, these stories are meant to be pleasing, and they're also supposed to reinforce the verse. That anyway. Okay. Okay. Now the next one is the last verse. Last verse in this description of this sort of extended discussion about rough impermanence, I believe, right? No, there's several parts to it. It says Delany, and so there are several verses, but this is the last section, the outline, I think. There's maybe, two. There's two verses, and then we get to subtle impermanence. Okay, so first of the two says, so the general description of these two verses are, then so this is a kind of a secular idea, right? That a courageous person does not fear death, right? What would you say that the Native Americans say, today is a good day to die, is a kind of a saying to show they were not afraid and they're ready to do battle and not be worried about their death. So saying Bao means is like that, like the warrior or the hero. For a hero, death is not a reason to be concerned, not a different to be apprehensive. Gakpa means to reject that notion. Two parts. Then here it says Dharma. Dharma is opposite of Bao. Dharma means coward. Dharma kona la chiwe jipa keba miteva. So it's miteva means unreasonable, incorrect. It's incorrect just for cowards to generate fear about death. So, and second, rangi okay, so we'll get to that when we come to. So that's what I was saying. Don't think that it's cowardice to be apprehensive about death. Dangboni. There chiwar ne meki chiwe jipani dharma konala migawa kewa yingi pao namni nikurdan chakba drube chirdu yongor chun nombo lula babe kyang nyam ngawa mebe chiwala mjikso she. Because I was saying that acknowledging the certainty of death. Chiwar ngemer means yes, death is certain. However, to be fearful about death is something that is dharma konala, is only something for cowards to do. To be unhappy about the prospect of one's death is only cowards have that reaction. It's cowardly to do so. Bao namni. Then here it says the heroes, the valiant ones. Now these are worldly dharmas, right? The worldly dharmas are gain and honor and fame, things like that. Right? There should not be a ba prefix letter. It just should be nye. Nyeva this is kind of it's a compound. Nyeva means gain, right? So the phrase is lava satkara. Lava means gain and honor. Lava is gain. Satkara is then honor, to be shown, deference, to be treated with regard, high regard. So that's something that worldly people seek. They would like to be wealthy, and they would like everyone to think they're wonderful, right? And they bask in that, right? Nyekur and Chakpa means then renown, and that is renown also is interesting phenomenon, right? Generally, then we should not, as a Dharma person, be interested in what other people think of us, right? Or what our reputation is in the community, right? That's not what should be uppermost in our mind. We should just be focused on Dharma. Then, in the ideal, in the conventional sense, is indifferent to fame, indifferent to disrepute. Then that has a real, a kind of validity to it, and it's a genuine sort of attitude to cultivate. But then for bodhisattvas, takes on a completely different, quality to it, and that is that the bodhisattva is seeking to be able to help the greatest number of people possible. Therefore, if one has a good reputation in a spiritual sense, then more people might seek you out, or more people might be willing to listen to you, or your word will carry more weight and that kind of thing. And therefore, you should be concerned about your reputation. So that's a kind of, a corollary or a different, way of thinking about fame. That I mentioned to you before, like among even in Tsongkhapa, well, there are so many texts, but in Lamrim in particular, I remember reading in one of Tsongkhapa's texts about how as long as we have sense of ego, as long as we have a sense of real self, that will be vulnerable to sense of a reputation. And so he gives an example, kind of the pernicious element of desiring fame can creep into one's Dharma practice, in that even if one is has great opportunity to study and to learn, then if you, somewhere in the back of your mind, you are thinking that, oh, other people must think I'm pretty, I'm a very spiritual person. That is the sense of, being kind of affected by how other people view you, and that's within the same category of fame, reputation. So anyway, so these are worldly goals, and so the hero seeks glory, right? In the Greek sense, the gods will think highly of you. In order to gain those qualities of wealth and honor and fame, then one way to establish it is, on the field of battle, to be, the invincible warrior. Yulngor means then in battle, right? Yulngor. Chön nombo means then weapons. You're not, you don't feel any fear. Chön nombo. Lula barbe kyang means even if you are wounded, right, in battle. Nyam no ameba means you don't fear that. Now you're not worried about that. Therefore, that's the way to face death. As like the intrepid warrior. Shena, che mirikta, he says, that's really, from Dharma point of view, very wrong. Then it's interesting that that's the way it's introduced, because the verse doesn't really make any reference to that bravery, but it does sort of, it gives a very, I think, well, let's just read it. But I like this. This one I think is, and I think yeah. Unfortunately, I think here that one didn't do it justice. And let me see here. this one did come. He said, yeah. So here it says, if you consider future goals, but not your waning life, then that's the first half of the verse. So, so it's saying, literally it says, the affairs of the future, maomba means the future affairs, future gains even, right? Those which were described as that, pursuing wealth, pursuing honor and fame and so on. Maomba means those things, those matters. Dawa literally means to look at them. But here it's a figurative sense of looking at them. It says to have regard for them, to be concerned about them. And then the second line, it's really, I think, very poignant. It says, Samba seba maimba. Samba means your life. Seba means being used up. Main means you don't have the same regard for that. It means you are not aware of that, or you're not paying attention to that. So saying, the idea is that life is precious, right? So we should use it for the Dharma. So otherwise, if we put our attention on, from our current vantage point, what can I do to ensure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I will be a successful, entrepreneur, or I'll become a wealthy person, or in a worldly sense, in a secular sense, I will achieve those goals, right? The done here is like a goal, those future goals. Then you set that as your sight, right? But what you're not recognizing, or what you're not realizing, is that whatever time you use to pursue those goals is, the sand is going through the hourglass. So samba means your time when you remain alive is, disappearing. Seva means, becoming exhausted. Right? So you're not recognizing that, right? That by setting these, worldly goals, setting your sight on these worldly goals, you're ignoring the fact that your life is waning, right? So, Maina means that. So that's first. That conditional means when that is the case, right? Meaning if you're that kind of person, right? Dani Songla, Dani ni Namcho Denshe Sushik Ma. Sushik Ma at the end says, who would say? Who would say who would say about the person who is selling himself? Selling himself, literally. Means selling himself means squandering the time that you have while you're still alive for the temporary gain of this life's aims. For that, Dani Namcho Den. Dani Namcho Den means who would say that person is intelligent about himself, intelligent about oneself. So who would say that person is, you can say in short, who would say such a person is prudent? Who would say such a person is intelligent, right? Right? You're, huh?
The word that comes to mind is perspicacious.
Perspicacious.
Yeah, perspicacious.
Yeah. So the idea is that you're putting your sights on one thing and you're ignoring the fact that time is passing and you're losing precious opportunity, and so that is selling yourself. Selling yourself means what potential your life has, you're bartering it, you're giving it away for the sake of some meager worldly purpose. Who would say that's a smart thing to do? Tsedi maong bai dun. So it says maong bai dun means future goal. Future goal. So you could possibly think future goal means future life's goal, but he says no. Tsedi maong bai dun means the future goals in this life, within the time between now and your death. Nigur sokla be tashing means that your Tao here is saying doesn't just mean think about it. It means you're striving, you're intent upon it. You have regard for it in the sense that you're pursuing it. Then here, this is good, right? Samba means. Then here it says, what is that? The living person, or the time of being alive, is long drube ten lu. So it's saying you have in your mind that you want to achieve certain goals, right? So those goals are something that you wish to enjoy, right? So the enjoyer is yourself, and that is long drube ten lu. Not only so long druba means pursuing those enjoyments, right? But also not only in pursuing them, if you do succeed, you're thinking of yourself as the one who is going to enjoy them, right? And that enjoyer is someone will have to still be alive. But that living person, seba, means is being used up. That time of while one remains alive is then slowly diminishing as you pursue that. And you are not considering that. Tawa maina means you don't recognize that, or you don't, put much attention on that. Then danigi tombe jawe. Then this is described as an action in which you're selling your own life. Danigi tok. Dani tong means danigi sok means your life force is being sold for the sake of gaining some future then goal, right? That's something which you don't yet have. Chola, then if you are like that, if that's how you are behaving, dani ni namche ba dan dem ba yino. Then who would say about themselves, oh, that person, here Dangyi means oneself, or that person is a being who possesses intelligence. Who would say such a person is intelligent? Sheba sushi mate. Right? That's the question. Mate, and then he answers the question. Suya mingi. No one would. Suya mingi. No one would. Momba kona marchet. They would call that person ignorant. Say that person is ignorant. Oh yeah. Shall we? Let's just read this line. This is interesting. This is one story which I've kind of struggled with, and I also think it's problematic. So Perna, and then in Chandrakirti's commentary. Oops. It says Songbe Bushin. Songbe Bushin means like the merchant's son, right? Like the merchant's son. So this is a story of a merchant's, offspring, and so somehow his behavior illustrates this verse. And so he says here, Dana says, actually, this is not part of the story. This is still part of the commentary on the verse. Dena means therefore, Soktang jelwa la takparchai. So takparcha means to examine or investigate. That's what the word tao means, to look at, means to examine or investigate. So here it's saying, therefore, what you should investigate is the fact that you are going to be separated from your life, right? Meaning you are going to, at some point, pass away. You're not going to live forever, so you may not even get a chance to enjoy the fruits of your labors for this life, much less accomplish anything that will benefit future lives, right? That yi is a conjunction. And therefore, don't have attachment for gain and honor. Right? And don't be attached to worldly aims. Then here it makes just a brief comment. There are certain translations. So we have versions of just the root text, just Aryadeva's 400 verses in the Tengyur, and they were translated. Maybe the wording is a certain way, and then we have Chandrakirti's commentary, which is the only commentary, which includes the verses, and the wording is not always the same. So, and not only that, there may be more than one translation of them, but certain editions, instead of Namchur Den, say Jamden. Jamden means, literally it means you don't have not compassion, you don't have affection. You don't have affection for yourself, right? You could see how that could conceivably be taken that way. Poetically, the person, there's a word, dak leksudeva. Dak means oneself. Leksudeva means one who wishes goodness, right, or success for oneself. One who wishes to wishes oneself well, we could say, right? That can be taken in a spiritual sense. The person who wishes himself or herself well is a person who, takes note of the Dharma meanings and applies them, and makes something of themselves spiritually, and does not, fall victim to their own, erroneous thinking. So Jamden could be someone who is affectionate toward himself or herself, could be someone who wishes themselves well. Could be that way. I'm not saying for sure. Anyway, Getsuch is saying that's not. So there is such a reading. Damba means a recitation, which means there is such a reading in certain texts. He says that's not. Means that's not the meaning of the commentary. Means he's suggesting that it's a corruption of the text. It may very well be. I don't know. Okay, so then here's the story. So this is the illustrative story. There was a son of a merchant. Then it says Changrel Mangbochen. Now the way I figured this out, or the way I sort of interpreted this, is Changrel is a two-word compound, Sanskrit compound. Chakpa means desire, and it can mean carnal desire. Then Changrel, as a compound, I think means like sexual liaisons, right? Changrel Mangbochen. So, being, a young person, a young man, being drawn to, sexual gratification. That's kind of the height of the example of attachment, right? That's a kind of extreme example of attachment. So here it's saying the son of a merchant who had many romantic liaisons. So he was someone who not only chased women but enjoyed women. Then here it says, now here the thing to do is both of these translators, I don't know if they one, I don't know which one came first in the two translations. They both came up kind of with the same explanation. It says, a merchant's son who had many love affairs considered only his attachment to others, not their reciprocation, and was soon ruined by the merrymaking and quarreling of his affairs. That's the explanation. I don't get that. I mean, so the reciprocation, I don't see the reciprocation.
I took it to be that he was showing them affection, but they weren't showing him affection back.
Right, and that's the only way that you could read it. But I don't think that I don't think that's right in myself. And the way I might be wrong. This one I will give Scott here I'll give you the choice, right? I won't.
Oh, no, don't make me.
No.
On your shoulders,
I think
man.
last time I was more insistent, right? Last time I was more insistent. This time I'll be less insistent because this is much more speculative. Okay, but this is the way I took it. Okay, so chapter I'm proposing is a two-word Sanskrit compound, right? Which means sexual liaisons as a compound, right? And then, if you'll notice, it says chapter mango chen shik. Okay, this is now just describing this merchant's son.
Right.
And then here it says par chakpa kona tai, right? So he paid attention or was concerned only about, and notice, chakpa. He was only concerned about the desire. He was only concerned about his lust, right? So that's taking one of the words in the two-word compound. And then it says, Tur jawa latawa min. He didn't give the same amount of attention to the word jawa. Now, jawa normally means connection, right? So desire connections is this, which refers to, liaisons with others. But I think that how Chanakirti is using the story is he takes that compound and he splits it into the two words. And he says that person was infatuated with the sexual behavior, indulging in his desires. Then the second meaning of jalwa has nothing to do with liaisons. I think what it has to do with goes back to the fact that he's a merchant's son. The fact that he's a merchant's son means that his purpose in life is business affairs. And business affairs means that he should be trying to, gain profits. So I think that there's a double meaning here of this word that's part of the compound. In the compound, it means these liaisons. But when it's separated into the two words, the second word is income or profit. So he only, he was a merchant's son, and he only thought about the sexual pleasures. He didn't think about, gaining, profit in his business ventures, which was his livelihood. Tur jawala tawa mimbe dene, and he says, and dene means here I think means therefore. Then changjal gogo jeba. Now here I believe gogo jeba means is an idiom which means to spend his money. So he spent his money in those sexual liaisons, and then and then he became destitute. To me, it kind of has a little more resonance to it, right? The destitute part, fits with, a merchant's son. So that's my take on it. So, take it as.
Is it like in English, like if you said he was concerned with love affairs, obsessed with love, he forgot his affairs.
Correct, something like that.
Really?
Correct, yeah, like that. And it kind of fits, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my attempt to. All right, so I'm sorry I ran over. It's break time. So.
You're like, are you down there?
All right. Yep. Okay, so this is now the second verse in this fifth category, which is described, am I right? Yeah, described as that you know, valiant persons, that one's courage does not mean that courage should not be a reason for one not to fear death, or shouldn't be identified as a sign that one doesn't fear death. So there were two. The first one we just did, and that was where we foolishly waste our life in pursuit of wealth. The next verse is that we described as foolishly committing bad deeds, ostensibly to protect or preserve our lives. That's how Chandrakirti, distinguishes between the two verses, but what's common between them. One is in terms of pursuit of worldly prosperity, and the second one is committing bad deeds inappropriately. So it says, this is page 11, right? And get the Norgit the Sokdon Meva Yina means just line 2. If it is reprehensible, Meva means to be criticized or to be ridiculed even. It is wrong. To Sokdon means to literally to spend one's life, to give up one's life. In the previous verse, Sokdon was by wasting it in meaningless activities. Norgidon do Sokdon means you waste your life for the sake of wealth. Randi Sok Suicher. So the Sokdon is to waste, right? They're now saying, okay, I don't want to waste my life, so I'm going to protect my life, right? Then Sok Suicher do Dekpacheva means then commit bad deeds for the purpose of guarding one's life. That's appropriate. It's the way the two verses are sort of tied together. Mirik, that means that's not good. Dani, but use a similar language. Uses in the previous verse, he uses the idea of selling yourself, right? Bartering yourself, meaning give away your life. Then in this one, use a different word. Tama means is like a collateral or a pledge or security. Like, you give something of value to someone, and they have possession of it, right? And then maybe they lend you money. Typically in a bank, collateral works that way. In this case, the security is yourself. You're giving yourself as security, and then that gives you license to commit wrongful deeds, right? Danitama shachete means having given yourself as security. It means you're accepting the consequences of your behavior, is what here it means, putting yourself. Actually, the word for tama in security is a word that has to do with being bound, right? So there is, I think it has that idea of bondage. You're kind of tying yourself into the consequences of your bad behavior, but the word also means, it has, in a monetary sense, it means some kind of something given as security. Danitama shajet, giving yourself a security, then using that as license for digle. So it's saying, why do you give yourself as security in order to commit evil deeds? Right? So the question is like that. Once again, a rhetorical question. So it's saying, while you're alive, you're, instead of using your life for, spiritual purpose, you're using your life to in committing wrongful deeds for some misguided purpose, like that. Right? That saying, why are you doing that? Is then, obviously, is the meaning is you shouldn't do that. Never. Then this is really ironic. This is the last part of this verse is really choice kind of language. He says, "Never kuni kenam tar tadala doja jawar se." Then the end of the jawar se is an idiom here. It means it must be the case that, or literally it means it's only that. So it's saying never means certainly, right? Certainly. Then that's a sign that you, right? You like the wise, right? And this is meant completely ironically, right? Then this is a sign that you are like the wise who have overcome attachment for the self. Dadla Jalwa means, so here the wise is described as being like an arhat, for instance, right? An arhat has abandoned all attachment, right? In particular, attachment for the self. There is no belief in the self. So the arhat is someone who is indifferent. And here it is saying, so now you are kind of indifferent to yourself in the sense that you are willing to forego any concern about the consequences of your action because you've overcome attachment for yourself. Obviously, he means that sarcastically, right? Ironically, right? So kind of giving up your life, putting your life as security in order to act, licentiously, to act, improperly, then that is kind of the idea of being here that you don't care. You're not concerned about the future consequences of your actions, in karmically speaking, right? You're harming your. So this is. If you remember in the Lamrim Chimel, we read the first day. We read Tsongkhapa's Karsa Chiwa Madrimbe Nimik, the section about the disadvantages that follow from failing to reflect on your mortality. And so he says, he gives that point, Michiwe Chok Zimba. So Michiwe Chok is, Chok means sort of the, in this case, almost like an alternative, right? There's Chiwe Chok, the side. Chok literally means side. Chiwe Chok means then the side of death. So if you think about the side of death, then that means being mindful of your death. Michiwe Chok means if you think about, if you tend to reflect in a way where you are not taking cognizance of your mortality. You're saying, oh, I'm going to probably live for a while. I'm going to probably live for a while. No hurry for me to do, to devote myself to Dharma. then he starts out from there and says the consequences of that are, then it says, oh, well, if you think you're going to live for a while, right, then you think, well, during this time when I'm going to live, I need to, provide for myself, right? I need to provide for my well-being. And so therefore you become concerned about this life's aims. And then when you can be concerned, when you have that kind of attachment, then that leads you to engaging in, mental afflictions arise, and you start committing non-virtuous deeds. So he's saying all of this flows from michue chok zimba, flows from sort of assuming that you're not going to die anytime soon. So here we're now kind of at the tail end of that, where you are, kind of your being is yourself, not in the sense of a real self, but in the sense of as a spiritual seeker who has the potential to do something worthwhile with your life. So you're taking that opportunity and you're sort of giving it away. You're sort of putting it in, you're giving it over. I don't know how you want to describe it. Metaphor.
Squander.
It is kind of squandering it, but here it uses the word of putting it up for security. Means you're
pawning it.
Yeah, you're you're giving someone else control over it, and by doing so, you're neglecting the consequences of what your actions might be. I think the kind of the notions involves that. So it means you're not recognizing the importance of using your life for your own betterment, and instead you're putting it at risk and engaging in all kinds of inappropriate behavior. And then he says, so in the second part of this, kind of sarcastically saying, you're someone who doesn't care about yourself. You're someone who's, willing to, cause yourself harm because you're indifferent to yourself, so to speak. So he says, lost my point. The idea was, so I started out by saying that how this mindset develops is from that point about not being mindful of your mortality. Not being mindful of your mortality allows you to sort of ignore the larger picture karmically, and to allow yourself to engage in behavior that is harmful to you in the end. So so he says here's how he describes putting yourself, giving yourself over as security, right? He says, giving yourself over as security means you're basically giving away what potential you have in such a way that that security, giving up the value of your life is putting yourself in, giving yourself as security in the sense that you will have to experience grave suffering in future lives. So that's how he interprets it, right? Having done that, so maybe the idea is that you're, for the sake of some near-term sort of presumed, short-term goal, you're willing to engage in harmful behavior, and by doing that, you're selling yourself in the future to have to pay at some future time, and you're not being cognizant of that. So, having done that, so for the sake of some insignificant goal that relates to this life, whether it be food or drink, right? Then you would steal, or you would cheat, or you would engage in digbele, right? Digbele would be wrongful behavior. So the idea is that you're not thinking about the consequences of your behavior, and because you're sort of focused only on this life and not anything beyond. Digbele ji jirna je says, why are you doing that? He says, said, and the same point is just spelled out in prose. This seems to be nothing more than a case where you are thinking of yourself as being like the arhats who have given up attachment to themselves. Okay, so that's all it has to say about that verse. The story here is a little. I think I'm gonna skip the story because we're running short on time, and I want to read the next verse, which is subtle impermanence. But this story is about. It's pretty straightforward. So Metongma means a prostitute. Yojin Zongba means she sold a Yojin means a rogue, or a deceitful person. So the deceitful person thought he was taking advantage of her, and instead the prostitute in the end tricks him. Zongba here, sold him, means sold him down the river. Then it doesn't tell the story. The story is in Chandrakirti's text. Okay, Niba Chao Mitakpa Gombala Ni. Here it says there's two verses. The first one I think is the only one that we'll read because there's a handout that I want to read. So Chao Mitakpa means not subtle impermanence, and subtle impermanence means now talking about the Buddhist doctrine of momentariness. And really, even though in this text it's not, there are only this verse and the next verse really talk about subtle impermanence. In relation to the Four Noble Truths, it's subtle impermanence that is more relevant and more important. So actually, I'm hoping that maybe when we finish the whole chapter, the first chapter, then I wanted to read from another text on subtle impermanence, which is really beautiful discussion, which includes kind of a whole process of meditation that culminates with making the inference that therefore all causally produced things only last for a moment. So that's an important. Obviously, it's a central doctrine of Buddhism. I believe that it's really the kind of the basis for the theory of selflessness. Even. Anyway, I'll save that for later. So here it says there are two verses to it. This one says Samba. Now here, Samba means Samba can be an abstract noun, or it can refer to a person. And in the Tibetan, you can't really identify which of the two it means. Samba means can mean life, or it can be the quality of being alive, right? But also can be a living being. And I believe that in this verse, it means a living being. Samba, jivaha. Jivaha means one who is alive, and it refers to all living beings. It also means life. Okay, so he says, so a living being, and actually it makes sense here because it means here living being in the sense of a person. And the sense of a person is the sense of an individual. And the individual is where we get the sense of self, right? A personal self. So a living being, that is to say, a person, is kechik rerewar seba. Kechik rerewar seba means lasts only from moment to moment. So you're only a living being for an instant. So you can say, living being at instant X, living being at instant Y, and so on. The living being only really lasts for that length of time and no more. There's no, persistence through time. So this is now actually, it's pointing to selflessness. So it says, Sulang, and I'm not going to look at the translations. I think they both kind of don't get that sense of the word samba as meaning a living person, right? Sulang samba shejawa means anyone whatsoever, right? Sulang, su here is also, su typically is not used for inanimate objects. It only is used for persons. Su is like, it can be the interrogative pronoun who, or the relative pronoun who. And here sulang, it means anyone whomsoever or whosoever, right? Anyone whosoever, sambashejawa. Anyone who is called a living being, anyone who is called a person, right? Living person. Sengi kechik leshen me, right? That living person is nothing other than, shen me means nothing other than a moment of consciousness, is only lasting for the instant that a moment of consciousness lasts. So that if we want to say what is a living person, we're saying it is each passing instant of the person's fleeting mind. Then it says gyo. Gyo then is another word for a person who has been born. So it means people, right? Gyo denge mirikpa. Then people do not recognize that. Nge mirikpa means, ngebar mirikpa means they do not realize that. That means their momentariness. People do not realize that. Therefore, dani sheba gun. Therefore, it is rare for there to be a person who knows himself or herself. Right? So it's very interesting. At the end, we have the word self, right? Knower of self, right? And it means knower of himself in the spiritual sense of, a self-aware person. Right? So it's a beautiful verse, and so it's conveying, now we're in a whole different order of impermanence. We're talking about, thinking of ourselves as, first of all, thinking of ourselves, again, it takes you away from your body, and it takes you, to whatever you are as a living being. First of all, it has to do with your conscious mind, right? All animate beings are beings that have minds. And the mind is not, something that has any, existence through time to it. Mind is only lasts for a moment. So to think of yourself as anything other than just a moment of consciousness is wrong, because that's what your true nature is. And there are very few people who know that. So, this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, right? So he says, Du nibar midurba. Du nibar midurba means not abiding for a second moment, to the second. Du means the second moment in time. We do not last beyond the first moment, each instant, right? Du ni marmi dava ngobo chuni yin. Ngobo means in this sense, it means a thing, an entity, a causally produced entity. That's their nature. All causally produced entities are such that they do not last for beyond a single moment. Now here use the word ngobo. The more classic term is duje. Ao dasha dusa du bayat jasa je duje. Samskrta is the Sanskrit for conditioned or causally produced things, right? So the phrase is duje tamje mi takba, right? Duje tamje mi takba. Sakba jang jeba dungelwa. Che tamje dongxing dang meba. Nyangin le deva shiwa o. So that is chiki gar takbe chakya shi. Those are the 4 seals of the Buddhist teaching. All causally produced things are impermanent. All samsaric, impure samsaric entities have a suffering nature. Then all entities are void of itself. And nirvana alone is peace. Okay, so here we're talking about the first one. Then that is the nature of all causally produced things, is chawe mitapa, right? Subtle impermanence. Therefore, semjen, see here, notice he uses for the su there as that pronoun is semjen su. It's not, it can't be a relative pronoun, or, I mean, it can't be a relative noun other than a person, right? So semjen sulan means whoever that being might be, to call that person a living being. When you say that person is a living being, you really are only referring to something which is a momentary mind, or the moments of consciousness. There's no person, there's no living being other than that. Then it says, because of the tendency to erroneously think of yourself as permanent meaning enduring through time. Gu simbe gyo means all those. Now here we're in the third line. Gyo means those persons, people who are then affected. Simba literally means grasped or seized or controlled or influenced by the error in which they mistakenly think of things as permanent, as lasting, whether it be external inanimate things or even themselves. Then those persons, then is in the instrumental, means just now the subject. De means that fact that the living being is nothing more than moments of consciousness. Some editions add the sa suffix, second suffix letter, which would be improper, but I'm virtually certain that the correct spelling is without that second suffix. The average person who is subject to error doesn't realize that. Without the second suffix letter, it means does not know that, does not perceive that. Therefore, dena means therefore. Jikten in the world, dani ki ngangsu. So it says the idiom is dani sheva. Dani sheva means knowing oneself. So here, so that you don't, take that to mean a real self, right? So he says dani ki ngangsu. Ngangsu means one's nature, one's condition, not knowing one's true nature, right? Dani ki ngangsu sheva gun means Kun means rare. The idiom, Sanskrit idiom, is difficult to find. Nyavarka, usually it says nyavarka. But it's probably what it is in the original, but it's a term that can be understood or taken to mean rare. So the person who understands their nature is rare. Therefore, then he says, therefore, then the instruction or admonition is therefore, you should strive to meditate on subtle impermanence. Okay. So I hope to read from Asanga's Shravaka Bhumi. Yeah.
So he's leaving aside the body in this altogether. Is there an accounting for the body in the
sense of self?
In the issue of subtle impermanence?
Oh, of course, the body also is subject to the same impermanence. But what he's talking about is somebody. What does it mean to be a living being?
Yeah.
So that is
and in that context, the body is put to the side for this argument, for this.
Well, what is the self in Buddhism? When we say conventionally, what is the self?
It's the collection of the aggregate.
Well, there are different interpretations.
Yeah.
Kind of the conventional one is that it's the continuum of the mind, right? And then, so the body is figuratively the self. We do not, except for our own minds, we are not privy, for the most part, to other person's minds. So the only thing we point to another person, we're actually pointing to their body,
right.
And we're saying, that's a person. And that's considered to be, valid conventional speech. So how is the body a person?
Right.
Okay, so it's a metaphorical use of the word person, where what its actual referent is, in the Buddhist sense, is the person's mind, or the continuum of the mind. That's the conventional position. And Abhidharma Kosha, you'll find that in Bhava Viveka, like in I think in the Tsongkhapa's what is it, Gongpara of Self, right? In discussing the self, he I think it's Bhava Viveka's commentary to to Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamika Karaka, and he uses that word. He says that the referent of the term self or person is the mind, because that's what goes from one life to the next. And the interesting thing is that Chandakirti, criticizes that. But anyway, so here we have Aryadeva, in a way, suggesting that the only thing that can be identified in our experience as what we could call a living person is something which lasts only for a moment. So it's a reference to subtle impermanence, and the verses indicating that few people are able to recognize that or understand that or comprehend that. So then the stories are the two stories. One is the person who, this is like, you can't, I don't know, I do remember, I don't remember what the source of it is, but the story, you can't step into the same river twice. This is an old kind of philosophical.
Heraclitus.
Heraclitus.
Oh, yeah, okay. So here, this is a kind of a version of that, of saying that someone chulung dulhungne, but not chulung dulhungne. So someone, dropped their clothing into a moving stream, and then came back sometime later and went to the place where the clothing fell into the water to look for it. How silly, obviously it washed downstream. So it's like that, saying that, things are like a moving river. Right? Then the other one is there's some kind of reference to some very swiftly moving worldly God, and that no one can catch him. And so our life is like that, like a swiftly moving deity. Somebody do tuan yoga mino. Do tuan yoga minos. Somebody jikbe somebody do tuan yoga mino. Catching mother jikbe somebody. Oh yeah. Catching my jikba means the living being is, it's impermanent in the sense that we change. We only last for a minute, and so the next moment after the one that we currently are experiencing is different, right? And that previous moment is then lost. Okay. So in this text, it doesn't go into it, but I took out and gave us a handout Chandakirti's comment about this. That's gonna have. Oh yeah. So this is, for those of you, did you get from the back table? Yeah. So this is, and the bottom is on the English is translation of this. So it says, this is the description of what that means, that we can understand subtle impermanence. How? He says, Mikpa le nyurdu poa niki chir. Mikpa is means object. So the idea is that consciousness or awareness is always, there's a word I'm talking about, that the mind always has some content. Mm-hmm. That content is the mikpa, the object, literally the mental object. Then the mind, it's difficult to perceive the mind itself, the subjective aspect of mind, right? Because it's formless. But we can be aware of kind of the aspect of consciousness by its content, right? So mikpa le nyurdu poa means because the mind's objects shift quickly, then from that standpoint, we can recognize that our mind is changing. Semgi keching mar jikpa, sengi keching mar jikpa, tok par hajayamikate. He says, now here he's using momentary, not in the strict sense, right? But he's saying that momentary in the sense that it's short-lived, right? That thoughts are fleeting, right? And he says that momentary destruction or cessation is not difficult to recognize. That's his assertion. He says, as follows. Now this is, I almost take this in the same way as a sangha. A sangha gives this very beautiful presentation of how to look at every aspect of our experience, the external world and our own being, physical and mental. And he identifies the kinds of change that we can observe.
This is in the Inner Science?
Yeah, I made reference to it in Inner Science. I didn't put the whole passage. I'm thinking maybe we can read the entire passage it's from the Charvakabhumi. And what the force of it, and the thing that really I think is so kind of informative, is that it's an exercise. It's an exercise that takes in all experience that we perceive. And it's sort of all-encompassing. And we're meant to reflect on it sort of in a methodical way, right? Or in an organized way. And then at the end of it, right, then he makes the observation that change is everywhere, and the only way that we could account for that is if things were momentary. And so therefore we can draw the inference to subtle impermanence. And so here, Chandrakirti is, I believe, saying much the same thing, only he's not really spelling it out. He's only talking about the mental side of it. Right? So he says, he gives an example. He says, what's a way to realize how the mind is constantly changing? Ditar, he says, as follows. Yige ala sope yingdrunam. Yige a means the vowel. There's Sanskrit, there are 16, is it? 16 vowels and 34 consonants, I think, right? Yeah. So it says, if you say all the individual vowels and consonants, one after the other, and so on, if you recite them aloud, quickly, right? Gembar means quickly, very quickly, then each one of those vowels and or consonants, or phonemes, to be used a term, so for each one of those phonemes, there's a different time and a different aspect, right? They're differentiable. They're different sounds, so we can see them as not being the same thing. And part of the illusion of permanence is the fact that things are changing, but there's a certain similarity from moment to moment, and we mistakenly think of that as, continuing to exist in an unchanged way. But here, if we say the vowels, that each one is separate, so we know that they're different, right? And they're perceptibly different, right? Time-wise and aspect-wise, they are separate, right? Therefore, if those are all, when we say them, right, we're making sounds, we're vocalizing them, but our mind can hear, we hear them with our ears and our mind perceives them. So each one of those vowels and consonants can be recognized as a separate state of mind, right? Della mikpe sem means the mind that grasps each one of those letters also must exist at a separate time and be of a different form, right? So they're distinct. We can realize that, right? So therefore, and now he's saying, le here shows reason. By virtue of the fact that those are separate times, separate instances of awareness that are existing at different times and that have different aspects to them. So they are not the same thing, right? Therefore, from that awareness, from that observation, we can recognize it can be established that the mind is momentary. Now, he doesn't mean here momentary in the sense of instantaneous, but he means momentary in the sense of fleeting in its nature and changing rapidly. Then now he gives a definition of moment. And this is a classic Abhidharma explanation. This comes from, I think, from Sarvastivada literature, maybe in other traditions as well. The word instant means du jibetar tupa. It means so a reduction in time, right? A reduction in time to its limit. Du jiva tartupa means which comes to its, to its culmination. Gurwalacha. So whatever the smallest unit of time is, that's what an instant is, right? And he says, Then that's defined as kibu topdang demba. Kibu topdang demba means a person who is strong, right? Who's healthy. Sego topa. And sego topa means finger snap. It's a very short moment of sound. Topa sam gi. So in that amount of time, in the sound of a finger snap, there are identified 65 aspects to it. So 1/65th of a finger snap is the smallest unit of time as defined in the classic Abhidharma literature. Now, actually, you know, if we that's in a conventional sense, right? So it's interesting to this is Chandakirti speaking, by the way. And Chandakirti is not only a follower of Nagarjuna, but he is a follower of the Prasangika school. Right? So, from an ultimate point of view, that is not logically sustainable. Right? That no matter how small the time is, you can always divide it smaller and smaller and smaller. Right? So this is sort of a conventional description from the classical Abhidharma sources, and he's just using that for the purpose of this discussion. It's not saying that Chandakirti himself, believes that is, you know, the correct description of the nature of time. So, in a conventional sense, that's one way of describing what an instant is. Okay, so then he says, Namba detabu means that kind of instant, right? So now, obviously, when we say the letters of the alphabet, we're not saying them in that kind of an instant, right? But so he's using the word instant twice. In the first case, he's using it in a broader sense. In this case, this is a quote strict sense of an instant. Namba detabu kechik means that kind of instant, meaning the 1/65th of a finger snap. Nambara sheba kechik, you know. Now he's going to subtle impermanence, and he's saying that's what an instant of consciousness is. That it lasts for that length of time, and he says, just as now he's broadening the doctrine. Just as Nambara sheba kechik yimba, just as consciousness is momentary, Eshindu, similarly, Duje Tamje, all samskaras. That's interesting because here using the spelling, which is samskara rather than samskrta, but they actually can be used interchangeably. So all samskaras means all conditioned entities which have the ability to condition other things, or samskaras. Right? This is like the word that's used for the fourth skanda. It's called samskara skanda. Then samskara means is the active form of a noun, right? That which conditions, or a conditioning thing, whereas samskrta is the past participle and means the thing which is conditioned, meaning as produced by other conditioning things. But every conditioned thing becomes a conditioning thing for something else, right? So they are interchangeable. So here he's saying all conditioning entities are the same as mind. Semtar, like the mind, kejimayinte, are also momentary in that strict sense. And now he's giving you the logical reason for that assertion or for that claim. Duje tamje, right? Duje tamje means all conditioning or conditioned things. Kema taktu means as soon as they have arisen, as soon as they have come into existence. Jikpa, then jikpa like gek mebecher means there is nothing which obstructs their annihilation or their disintegration. There's nothing which keeps them from disintegrating, right? That's one thing, right? So, and mitakpa ni kyang, kevatsam la tabanikichur, mitakpa ni kyang, kevatsam la tabanikichur. So he says the impermanence, right? Impermanence means their disintegration, right? Only depends upon their arising, right? So it's sometimes they say, yeah, he says here, means once the thing comes into being, there's nothing that sustains it, nothing that keeps it in existence. And when it comes into being, right, then it says mitakpani means its impermanence. The fact that it does disintegrate only depends upon, literally only depends upon, means is created by or is built into the entity when it arises. So it arises in such a way that its impermanence is inherent to it. It is inclined to disintegrate, and there's nothing that stops it from disintegrating. Hence, it disintegrates as soon as it comes into existence. So that's sort of the logic. Okay. Okay. So this is a very brief description of subtle impermanence as formulated by Chandrakirti. Detanna, and then it says consequently, right, in that case, that being so, Semjen Sulayan, therefore, and this goes back to the verse, Semjen Sulayan means no matter who the being is, Kechik le hakpe samba, right, they are not a living being for longer than an instant. There is no living being who is longer than that lasts for longer than an instant. Okay, and that last sentence is not in the English, but it's in the Tibetan. Okay, so that's kind of about what we have time for today. Yeah.
So that means, I always struggle with this, and so it means that if I'm having a thought,
Yeah.
then that thought is made up of discrete moments, and the elements of that thought, the words of that thought, are coming into existence, and then the mind that holds that thought is going out of existence and then coming back into existence. Is that how it's working, or?
That's the idea, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what provides?
So how can you have discrete thoughts? Because those discrete thoughts seem to last longer than that, right?
Right.
Well, I guess it's a theory of process, that it's a process, and that even though the moments of consciousness are that fleeting, that there is a similarity to them, and it's through that similarity that we are able to have the ordinary thinking process that we engage in. But that's part of the the whole idea that the world that we create by our ordinary thought process is imaginary. It's part and parcel of that. I mean, it doesn't simply rely on the notion of momentariness, because the Prasangikas and the Madhyamikas assert that those so-called momentary instances of consciousness don't have any objective reality. But your very question sort of suggests how we resist that idea, right?
Because it also seems like there would have to be some other framework, because if one part of the thought is then followed by another thought that is similar to that thought, then it seems like there's some overarching logic or framework in between those thoughts, and yet we're saying that everything goes out of existence between those discrete moments. That's what I struggle with.
Right. Well, I would propose that you wait until we read Asanga's text. But you know, this is you know this is the culmination of the idea of impermanence, right? Is to sort of kind of try to immerse yourself in that doctrine and try to, you know, appreciate, you know, what, not only what it is, because the basic, you know, outline of the doctrine is comprehensible, but the idea is, well, how do we actually, you know, come to that realization? And so what I'm suggesting is that you have to have a technique, you have to have a methodology that sort of, you know, leads your mind through a, you know, series of steps that kind of prep you for making that inference. And one thing is, you know, there's, well, I'm kind of running out of time, but there is the notion of, in meditation, there's a notion of, you know, wisdom born of learning, right? Which is where you're being introduced to ideas that you're not familiar with, and you're trying to comprehend kind of what these are. That's a kind of a basic developing correct beliefs. Then you have to refine those using reasoning to validate those beliefs and to, you know, confirm them with your reasoning. So that gives you, that rises to the level of inference, okay? And then you have to take that correct inference and somehow go from that to a level of direct realization, right? And then that inference then becomes a form of direct perception. So there's the direct perception of the senses, which we're familiar with, and then there is the what's called yoga pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is a word for direct perception. Yoga pratyaksha is a form of direct perception that is through meditation, right? So that's what we normally say is direct realization. So that direct realization is, in the case of impermanence, not only impermanence, but impermanence in particular, is a form of direct perception of the mind consciousness. It's not direct perception in any sensory way. It's like we see, you know, momentariness. We realize it in a very in a way that it is without any conceptual thought. There is some sort of direct appreciation of it, but it's mental in nature. Okay, but to get to that, you have to have a valid inference, right? So that's what I want to address with Asanga's text, and it's very interesting because he goes from he describes it in terms of observable change, that no matter where we look, and in our experience, right, we can recognize everything is, you know, shifting all the time, and you know, that's a kind of awareness. That's a kind of experiential, you know, state which we don't normally develop. So it brings you to that. And then from there, then he starts talking about, well, if everything is actually subject to change in you know, in an observable way, right? And there's really, you know, we can't see anything that's not subject to change. So what's necessary for that, you know, experiential fact to be possible? And so he draws the conclusion basically that The only way that could be possible is if everything inherently is prone to disintegration. And if everything is prone to disintegration and doesn't, like we have the idea that, we see things to be changing, and we do something has to act on it to change. We think of, breaking something with a hammer. Well, what he's saying philosophically is we have to come to the understanding that that's not required for change to occur. It doesn't, atoms don't have to collide in order for things to change. And so then if that's the case, then that's this claim here, right? That nothing prevents things from disintegrating, and they're, as he says here, mitapani means their impermanence, their disintegration. The only thing that is necessary for it to occur is that it arises. That's really the kind of the marvelous nature of the Buddha's teaching about impermanence is to come to that realization. So, we don't really, there's nothing really that addresses that in the Lamrim at all. Chandakirtana Asanga talks about it in terms of meditation. He gives an overview. He spells out kind of a technique for developing that realization, which I think is really extraordinary. But the Charvaka Bhumi, that's not widely read, even though it's well known in the Tibetan tradition. I don't think too many people. I've never seen a reference to it. The one where it is talked about is the Pramanavartika, and the Pramanavartika focuses mostly on that idea of that things don't need something to, there's nothing that, there's no glue that holds things together such that the only way you can, break them is by some external, factor to kind of cause their disintegration. Their disintegration is natural. It's kind of extreme, entropy, right? That all things are tending to that disintegration. It's an intuition. It's a mystical intuition, in fact.
Okay. The thing that comes to mind is like a fountain. Like a fountain stays in the same place for the water, but the water's constantly changing, right? It makes the same shape, but it's kind of like...
Yeah. There are lots of images.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're over the time. Yeah. Dani rindu pele sonini kadarayan bakran shi saban lo mi mari dongzhou wanam nam zhen gyao wei wang bo da gyu dharma sun be jira kundu yang Jambe yangi se we jesum dembe rimba gun salam gi sho ne trupe gena ne jesho rangi ji shin to pe lam gi shuga se we dang be ta ge Chowe yiki mumba sejene, kyawe tenba yurin zingyuji, tenba rinjin chogi ma kyaba, kya kyanyamba gyube chodeni, nyingje chenbu yira gyobayi, Pende Taradesa Waraje Marasha Seje Gawe Me Juntin Le Dro Janju Langi Rimbe Tanda Nam Ki La Pete Gawe Zeba Rindu Kyongyu Lam san dru pe tun gen dru che shi. Ke gen se che mi da mi mi wen. Se ra kun tu kya we na pa yi. Nam da lam dan dra wa ra han yu ji. Kang se te pa shou la chu chu. 诸心诸拉僧巴得一塞，顿登南吉大度着觉心，这西嘎子咒文常有句。地教我滚，萨那耶些早早心，萨那耶些得中会。 Tambakuni Toba Show. Okay.